He's the greatest, man.
That's
No,
so
he's
depressing.
the best. He's the best, dude.
Thanks for being with us here on Live Now from Fox. We do have some breaking news that just came into our newsroom that we have to bring to you. It's official there. British rock star Ozzy Osbourne has died at the age of 76.
Did we ever really know Ozzy Osbourne, the man behind the myth, the roar, the crown of Prince of Darkness? Here's the human story, told through the eyes of the guitarist who stood just off his shoulder for decades. Stay with me. This is an honest, emotional tribute to a friendship that shaped heavy metal and a final message that still echoes. This isn't a scandal story. It's a love letter, a real one. The headlines told you how big the stages were, how wild the tours seemed, how impossible it was to separate the legend from the life. But if you want the truth about Ozzy Osbourne, the private truth, you have to listen to the people who were close to him when the lights cut out and the crowd went home. Few people can speak to that truth like Zakk Wylde. Zakk was the kid with the Les Paul and the lion's heart who stepped into Ozzy's world in 1987. He was 20 years old and hungry, with a tone that could split concrete and a vibrato that sang like a siren. The story of their first years together is stamped on records that reshaped heavy metal. No Rest for the Wicked, 1988. No More Tears, 1991. Osmosis, 1995. They're chapters in a friendship, not just album titles. Studio days bled into tour nights, and a musical partnership settled into something older and deeper, a kind of family bond. Ozzy could be blunt, rude, hilarious, self-deprecating, and unbelievably generous, often in the same hour. Zakk matched him with sincerity, loyalty, and a willingness to play for the song, not the spotlight. People outside the circle often imagine Ozzy as chaos incarnate, the voice, the bat story, the mayhem. But ask the people who worked with him closely, and you'll hear a different tone. They talk about a guy who said, "Thank you," a lot, who worried about everyone else before himself, who cracked jokes to cut the tension. They talk about Ozzy, the husband who adored Sharon, Ozzy, the father who teared up when his kids were proud of him. Ozzy, the friend who never forgot to call back. Sometimes he forgot, but always came through when it mattered. And yes, Ozzy, the band leader who expected heart and soul on stage because he was giving the same. If you want proof of the bond, look at the timeline. Zakk left and returned more than once. The music world pulled him in other directions with Black Label Society, Zakk Sabbath, and even standing in for the late Dimebag Darrell with Pantera. But Ozzy remained a fixed star in Zakk's sky. When Ozzy wanted the sound of home, he called Zakk. When Zakk wanted the feeling of home, he answered. That's not just work, that's trust. Years rolled forward, the spotlight never left, but life did what life does. It complicated everything. Ozzy's body took hits. He revealed a Parkinson's diagnosis to the public in 2020, and he'd been wrestling with the fallout from old injuries long before that. The world saw fewer shows and more hospital rooms. The jokes stayed, the gratitude stayed, the music stayed off, but the body was honest. It told him things he didn't want to hear. And still, even then, Ozzy dreamed of one last roar with his brothers. On July 5, 2025, inside Villa Park in Birmingham, the dream came true. The event was called Back to the Beginning, a farewell in the city that raised him. Ozzy stepped out, not as the monster of your childhood poster, but as a human being who had given everything he had. He sang from a throne, bat-winged and black, gothic and brave, because that's what his body allowed. The moment he sat down, the stadium stood up. Guitars flared. Riffs rained down. And the sound of those songs, songs that birthed a genre, rolled across the night like a steel tide. Zakk was there, not just as a guitarist, but as a guardian. Watch the footage and you can see it. He's closer to Ozzy than usual, eyes flicking over, hands ready, stage setup bent around what Ozzy needed in that exact second. If you've ever cared for someone on a hard day, you recognize that stance. That's not star behavior. That's family behavior. Backstage was a zoo. Everyone wanted a piece of Ozzy's photos, hugs, a few rushed words. Zakk made a choice that felt right in the moment. Give the old lion space, let him breathe, catch up the next day when the world got quieter. He didn't know there wouldn't be a next day for catching up, not in the way he imagined. Later, after the noise drained and the lights died, a text came in from Ozzy. The message was simple, human, and pure. Apologies for the chaos. A thank you for everything. And the kind of love two brothers say when words have to do the lifting. That short message wasn't stagecraft. It was the man. 17 days after that last performance, on July 22, 2025, Ozzy Osbourne died at age 76. The news came like a thunderclap, and then an echo.
Ozzy Osbourne, founding father of British heavy metal, the frontman for Black Sabbath, and a reality TV luminary, has died after a years-long struggle with Parkinson's disease.
You could feel the shock ripple across music, across memory. Even people who never bought a metal record could tell you where they were the first time they heard Crazy Train. Suddenly, the noise around his life, myths, jokes, and rumors fell away. And what stayed standing was the person, the husband, the dad, the friend, the frontman who gave his body and his voice to the stage long after most people would have walked away. Zakk's public words after Ozzy died were simple and grateful. He thanked Ozzy for blessing the world. He pointed to life, not the legend. And when he talked about that last show, he talked about what mattered most. Ozzy, on stage, in his hometown, doing what he loved, surrounded by people who loved him back. The backstage madness didn't matter. The missed hug didn't matter. The thank you did. The love did. If you listen closely, you can hear the bigger truth Zakk is revealing. Ozzy Osbourne, the icon, was built by Ozzy Osbourne, the man. Not because he was perfect, but because he kept showing up. He sang when it hurt. He worked when the headlines said he was finished. He tried to be a better husband, a better father, a better friend. He said he was sorry. He said thank you. And he never stopped cheering for the people around him. Zakk's whole story sits on that foundation. Go back to 1988 for a second. A young Zakk is tracking guitars on No Rest for the Wicked, feeling the weight of a job most guitarists would sell their souls for. Ozzy could have crushed him under that pressure. Instead, he lifted him. He teased him. He pushed him a lot, and then he praised him. On tour, between the absurdities and the adrenaline, Ozzy was the guy who checked in. You good? 2 words that said, you're not alone. Zakk carried that into every band, every tour, every friendship that followed. Jump to 1991. No More Tears arrives with a riff that feels like a tidal pull and a solo that burns slow and bright. The title track becomes a signature moment in their live shows. It's dark and aching, and somehow hopeful. That song is the spirit of their bond. Pain sharpened into power, sorrow held in a hand strong enough to lift it. The videos, the awards, the money, those were side effects. The core was a relationship that made them both larger than they were alone. Fast forward, Zakk forms Black Label Society, builds his own kingdom of sound, and keeps a home for heavy music alive in clubs and arenas all over the world. The riff altar stays lit, but Ozzy is that original chapel. He calls Zakk back in 2017, and the old spark is still there. On stage, they fall into the familiar gravity. Ozzy the ringmaster, Zakk the right hand, the two of them carving the air until it shakes. People love to ask what the real Ozzy was like. Here's the truth. He was funny, wickedly funny, dry as a bone 1 minute, cackling like a teenager the next. He was also kind. He could chew you out, sure, but he'd hand you a coat on a cold night and make sure you ate. He was proud of being a survivor. but he was prouder of his family. He adored Sharon, fought with her, made up with her, leaned on her. He loved his kids. He trusted the circle he built. And when the cameras went off, he was a soft touch for anyone who needed a favor. That's why the final show mattered. Not because of spectacle, though there was plenty of that, but because it was active love. It was a city saying thank you to its son, a band saying, "We remember," an audience telling a man he was seen. Zakk's role in that moment wasn't to outshine anyone. It was to keep the flame steady so Ozzy's voice could ride it. Watch how he angles his guitar slightly toward the throne, how he shifts his pedal board so the sound blooms just right at Ozzy's ear. That isn't micromanagement, it's care. And then the last text. Think about it. Rock history remembers the final songs, the final bows, the final headlines. But the last private words often reveal the whole person. Ozzy's message to Zakk after that show wasn't scripted. It wasn't long. It carried two themes. "I'm sorry I missed you. Thank you for everything." That's humility and gratitude in 10 words. That's the truth. Everybody and their mother were in the backstage dressing room, and I just wanted to give him a break. I figured we'd see him later on, the next day or whatever. But no. The last text I got from Oz was saying, "Zachy, sorry, it was like a madhouse back there. I didn't see you." He goes, "Thanks for everything." It was just us talking, saying, "I love you, buddy." That was it. One of the deepest threads in Zakk's tribute is responsibility. He talks like someone who understands that a gift is also a debt. When he says he's blessed and grateful, it isn't a cliché. It's a mission statement. Because Ozzy gave him a life, not just a job. He gave him a standard. He gave him a way to measure himself that had nothing to do with charts or gear or magazine covers. Show up for your people. Push yourself. Laugh when you can. Say thank you, even on the days that break you. The final weeks of Ozzy's life were full of public love. Fans lined bridges. Musicians flooded the feeds with memories. The family gathered close. There was a funeral procession in his hometown, a wave of flowers, and a street that turned into a chorus. If you're looking for drama, it's not there. What remains is the quiet hum of respect. Zakk didn't write essays or stage a performance around his grief. He did something more honest. He remembered out loud. He pointed to the message that mattered. He told the story in plain words so everyone could see the man he knew. And here's another truth that lives between the lines. For all of the stories that swirl around Ozzy, for all the myths that cling to him like stage fog, the thing that cut the deepest was his courage. Courage to admit he was hurting. Courage to stand or sit on a stage and give what he still had. Courage to say sorry and mean it. Courage to say thank you and mean that too. Zakk's tears, his pauses, his careful phrasing when he talks about that last night, they're not about celebrity. They're about witnessing courage up close and feeling lucky to have been near it. If you listen to the way musicians talk about Ozzy after his passing, you'll notice the same words over and over: mentor, friend, father figure, inspiration. He had the instincts of a street fighter and the heart of a host. He was unfiltered, sometimes to a fault, and endlessly curious. He loved guitars. He loved great singers. He loved the pulse of a crowd, that moment when thousands of strangers become a single voice. He loved the people who loved him. Zakk doesn't have to invent a truth about Ozzy to make a headline. He just has to repeat what Ozzy spent his life doing. "He's so excited about this," she told the BBC in February, "about being with the guys again and all his friends. It's exciting for everyone." There's a reason that last concert felt like a closing circle. It wasn't just that everyone knew something was ending. It's that Ozzy had always been a circle maker. He gathered the wounded and the restless, the kids who felt too loud for their rooms, and too weird for their schools, and he gave them a home in a wall of sound. Zakk learned that lesson early and carried it into every stage he set foot on. He builds rooms where misfits fit. That's the inheritance. Even the setting told a story. Villa Park, Birmingham. The sky above the city was where Ozzy first imagined a different life. The stage was packed with peers and disciples, and the cameras were everywhere. Yet the most powerful image was small. A hand reaching out to steady a friend, a nod of thanks between songs, a grin that said, "We're still here." The throne wasn't a weakness, it was a throne. A king sits, a king sings, a king bows. That night the crown was humility. The grief afterward was loud and quiet at the same time. Loud in the tributes, the street memorials, the radio blocks of Sabbath and solo tracks. Quiet in the spaces where people who worked with him looked at a guitar case and didn't open it. Zakk's grief came out the way working musicians grieve, by playing the songs again, by telling the stories again, by repeating the thank you he got from Ozzy back to the world that gave Ozzy a place to stand. He didn't hide from the sadness or milk it for attention. He turned it into service. It is with more sadness than mere words can convey that we have to report that our beloved Ozzy Osbourne has passed away this morning. He was with his family and surrounded by love. We ask everyone to respect our family privacy at this time. Service, that's a word you don't hear much around rock and roll, but it's the right word. Service to the songs, to the fans, to the people who built the foundation. When Zakk talks about Ozzy now, you can hear a vow under the memories. He's saying, "I'll carry this, carry kindness, carry the humor, carry the discipline that says there's no such thing as a small gig if you're playing for someone's only night out this year." That's how he honors Ozzy, not by trying to replace him, but by embodying what he taught. The final message, the literal last message, wasn't a grand speech. It was a text, and that's perfect. Because life isn't built from the big moments alone. It's built from the small ones repeated. Zakk knows that. Ozzy lived that. One more, sorry. One more, thank you. One more, love you, buddy. If you want the truth Zakk revealed about Ozzy, it's right there. The truth is that the public Ozzy and the private Ozzy were the same core person, just turned up or down for the room. The truth is that the man who could command a stadium could also send a message that would make a grown man sit down and cry. There are a few images that will stay with anyone who watched that last show or followed the tributes after. Ozzy's hands gripping the arms of the throne, knuckles pale, voice steady. Zakk's guitar angled like a shield. Sharon's eyes were shining as she looked toward the stage. Fans old enough to be grandparents were lifting kids onto their shoulders so they could see history happen. The exit wasn't quiet, but it was dignified. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. It wasn't about death, it was about gratitude. And gratitude is where Zakk keeps taking us. He doesn't tell you that Ozzy was a saint. He tells you that Ozzy said thank you when it counted. He doesn't tell you that Ozzy never failed. He tells you that Ozzy kept trying and kept laughing, even when the body said stop. He doesn't paint a new icon. He wipes the dust off the old one so you can see the eyes. He was with his family and surrounded by love. His family, including wife Sharon Osbourne, as well as kids Kelly Osbourne, Jack Osbourne, and Louis Osbourne. If you want to make sense of the scale of what happened, the end of a voice that helped invent heavy metal, you can go to the numbers and the headlines. But the heart of it is a small exchange between two friends after a night that meant everything. Zakk has carried that exchange into every sentence since. A message that shrinks the world down to gratitude and love. That's Ozzy's last lesson, translated by a student who became a brother. So here's what we're left with, what Zakk himself is left with. A cityscape of songs that will outlive all of us. A stack of memories he can't play on stage. a final text he will never delete, and a mandate to keep the spirit alive. To be the guy who shows up, who cares, who thanks, who forgives, who laughs. The riffs matter, but only because the people do. Ozzy taught that better than anyone. Zakk learned it as well as anyone. The public sometimes wants a darker truth, some hidden betrayal or secret rift to chew on. Zakk refuses that story. He doesn't flinch from the hard days, but he doesn't sell his friend's humanity to satisfy a rumor. The truth he's offering is more demanding. It asks us to measure greatness by love given and love returned. It asks us to define courage as the refusal to quit and the willingness to say, "I'm sorry," at the end of a long night. It asks us to believe that the heaviest thing in heavy metal isn't the sound, it's the heart. When Zakk talks about Ozzy as an older brother figure, he's describing more than a role. He's describing a way of being that slips from one generation to the next, the way a riff slips from a record into a kid's hands and changes his life. Ozzy changed Zakk's life. Zakk is changing other lives now. That's how the story keeps moving even when the main voice goes quiet. And if you want to understand Ozzy's place in the wider story of rock, don't stop at the tropes. Listen to the discipline under the madness, the songwriting nerves that kept him chasing a chorus that would stick for decades, the work ethic that brought him back to stages he had no business standing on anymore, the loyalty that kept his circle tight even when fame tried to blow it apart. This is the truth Zakk confirms, again and again, that behind the eyeliner and the pyrotechnics was a craftsman and a friend who built a life around saying thank you to the people who showed up. Zakk knows better than anyone that grief and gratitude are twins. One makes the other possible. You can hear both in his voice when he remembers. You can see both in the way he places his hands on the guitar he first lifted in Ozzy's band. You can feel both in the way he keeps the songs alive without turning them into a mausoleum. Memory is not a museum. It's a stage, and the lights are still warm. That's the truth about Ozzy Osbourne that Zakk Wylde has revealed with steadfast love. Ozzy didn't need another myth. He needed to be seen as he was, a man who gave what he had, who said thank you, who loved big. The last time he played, he did all of that again. The last time he texted a friend, he did it again. And through Zakk's eyes, through Zakk's words, that's how he will be remembered. Here's what matters. A final show in a hometown stadium. A final text that said, "Sorry, thank you, and I love you." A friendship that turns sound into shelter. That's the real Ozzy Osbourne. And that's the truth Zakk Wylde brings to us. Plain, humble, and strong. If this moved you, tell me what line of Ozzy's or what moment still lives in your head. What's the one song you'll play tonight to keep his voice loud?